Today you see a gorgeous woven blouse. The print is amazing, and when I saw the pattern there was just one little thing I wanted to change. V neckline, but it was quite low cut. That can always be changed, and I'm going to show you how. Hi sewing friends, I'm Karina from liftingpinsandneedles.com. Welcome to this channel that is all about sewing, limitless sewing, and today I have a top that I'm super excited to share. It's actually the last thing I've sewn, so fresh off the sewing machine, and it was the pattern that won the votes on my Patreon page for the January monthly sew along, which I do in great detail. So I was just so excited to share on the channel. The pattern that I'm talking about is from Seamwork. Maybe a lot of you might have a subscription where you get monthly patterns, but you need to know also that you don't need to be subscribed to get these patterns. If you like one individually, you can buy them on their own, and that is what I've done. I've also noticed there's quite a few nice free patterns there on the website as well, so I'm excited to sew those up. And I hadn't looked at Seamwork for such a long time. There's quite a few cute things there, so I think I'm going to be sewing this brand a little more often. I really loved it when I saw it on the website, except for that low cut V. That everything has a fix, especially in sewing. I'm not affiliated to the brand, anything like that. I will leave the Sage top link down below if you want to look at it. I don't receive any commissions, nothing like that. So the Sage top is for woven fabrics. It's a semi-fitted design. It's got nice waist shaping. It's at the high hip. It's not a long top. It's got a V neckline, quite low from all the pictures I saw on the website. So I always knew that was going to have to come up. Button placket going down. Princess seams in the front and the back. The princess seams come from the shoulders down. The sleeves are lovely. They're normal here on the top, no gathers, nothing like that. But then they go out and have a lot of volume here at the bottoms. Bishop sleeves, little casing with an elastic on there to give it that shape and blousing effect. Now the center for the front and the back are both double, so it's semi-lined on the inside, which makes it super neat. And also that's the way that you finish this V neckline, which makes it not too complicated. You need woven fabrics for this one. Medium weight I would say is the best, just to keep the structure, the shape. You don't need drape for this, and I think if you choose something a little more structured, you'll have an easier time sewing. 100% linen blends, linen rayon blend. That's actually what I chose. You have different types of cottons that you might find nice. Poplin, seasaka, chambray, that type of thing. The only thing with the structured fabric is because you have a billowy bishop sleeve here with some volume, that's just going to be more dramatic. If you didn't want that, and if you want your sleeve to look more delicate and flowy, then go with something with drape, rayon twill, rayon crepe, tencel. A regular polyester crepe would be okay. I would just avoid fabrics that's super lightweight, like 100% rayon in the typical weave, you know, very lightweight, because of all the seams. I don't think they would keep their shape really nicely. And it just will make the whole process a little harder, or the neckline, the placket. It's just harder to work with that type of fabric. You need some buttons, 6 to 8 buttons. You know, when there's a range, you know I'm going to use more buttons. I like them closer together. You need only a small piece of fusible interfacing, because the only piece that needs it is a button placket. Now there's one little extra notion that I added to my project, and it's just because I have it now and I didn't have it in the past. I was able to purchase 2 rolls of fusible stay tape. I have one in black, I have one in white. I have yards and yards and yards of it. I have it for a long time. I think it makes a big difference to stabilize that V neckline and the rounded area at the back. A superior method than just stay stitching, which is the bare minimum that you can do there to stabilize that neckline. So have a little bit of that, and I'm going to show you in a sec how I applied that. So excited about my fabric because I've already used it before. I've made the sea change jumpsuit from Pattern Emporium with the same fabric. Gorgeous pink and beige, very interesting design there in the fabric. So because there's princess seams and all these design features that I really wanted to showcase, I decided to cut my pieces in a certain way that you would still see the design lines even though it's a print, something that's not easily achievable unless you're working with a solid. But I was dead set on using this print. So let me just show you how I'm going to place these pattern pieces here on my fabric, just for fun. This is what I had fun with, figuring it out. I had a vision in mind, and let me share that with you. I want to show you how I'm figuring out the way that this blouse is going to look. I've chosen this fabric. It's actually bright pink and beige. I've used it before to sew a jumpsuit. I have so much yardage. I'm going to place it on the cross grain. So this is the selvage here, and that's where I have the fold. So in essence, I should be putting my pieces like this, but I want the vertical print It's just for creative reasons. I have already washed this. I'm not scared that this is going to start shrinking. So I've already done my pre-treating so that I can cut it on the cross grain just because of the look. So you can see this area has those little stripy things like this, and this area has a different type of print. So I'm going to place the side front and the side back on these types of prints, and this one I'm going to place the back. Now the back is meant to be cut on the fold, and we cut 2 of them. So to make it easier, I just extended, I placed another piece of paper, and so I don't have to cut it on the fold twice. I can just cut it once and it's going to be right there. The reason that I'm doing this is so it looks really cool. And the other reason is so that you can really see the princess seams, because we're going to have different types of prints within the same print so that you can see the seam lines and the design of the garment. So over here where we have these little stripes as well, I'm going to place the side back right there. Just fun and games. Takes a little extra while to think it up and cut it up, but I'm sure it's going to look amazing. The sizing for Seamwork is quite interesting. For this pattern, there's 2 blocks. One is from 00 to 18 US. That is drafted for 5'8" height, and it's got a C cup. The other one is from 12 to 30, drafted for 5'9", and it's got a double D cup. So check out which one is going to work better for you. And if you're in the range of 12 to 18, there's a bit of an overlap. If you're thinking which one to go to, which block, just choose the one that's going to match your bust cup size better. I'm talking about sewing cup sizes. So if you're closer to a C or closer to a double D, that's how you would choose where to go. I chose the block 00 to 18 with the C cup because that's exactly me. I'm also 5'8", so just looking at this, I'm thinking I have a high chance of this working out. So excited about that. You can see the size chart, and all of my measurements go exactly into a size 14 here. And then when you look at the finished garment measurements, you see how much ease there is. I always do that analysis before sewing because it's really important. You have about 3 inches of ease at the bust, which is perfectly fine, around 7 at the waist. But then when you go down to the hips, it's 1 inch smaller than the stated hip circumference, which would just means it's a shorter top. It's at the high hip and it's not going to reach the full hip. But for my body shape, because my waist is here and then it curves out quite dramatically, my hip shape curve there, my mid hip and my high hip aren't that much smaller than my full hip. And I knew I was going to have fitted hips. It was not going to end up well. What happens when you have fitted hips? You know, the fabric starts riding up looking for a smaller place in the body, and then you end up with fabric here. And then a lot of people think you have sway back issues, and it's just the hips don't have enough ease. So for my body shape, that would apply to an hourglass pear shape. I think you could size up to the next size at the hips just to have a little bit more comfort. If you're more rectangular, then maybe this is going to be fine for you. So just think about that. It doesn't mean that just because the measurements on the chart are exactly what they are, that it's going to fit like intended. I always knew I was going to make a test garment. I've been collecting really old used pillowcases, I've been using for years. They're quite ratty and just not nice anymore. So I'm going to start using them for making these test garments. Nice cotton material. I knew I could get a lot of information out of this non-wearable test garment. The most important being how low the V neckline was going to be. Now, if you take a pattern that has a V neckline, a certain size, and then several different people try it on, it's not going to fit the same on everyone. It depends on your height, this length of your body. So I wanted to see how it was going to look on me, because I was seeing the models on the website and thinking maybe it looks lower on them than it's going to look on me. I don't know. I'd rather just see it. So I made no changes to the pattern. I just sewed it as is to check on me how that was going to go. I also marked the waist all around my test garment so that I knew where the waist was on the pattern and I compare it to me. You know, I don't know if they draft for a longer torso or what that was going to be like, because we all have different vertical proportions. You know, I might be 5'8" like the pattern says, but that doesn't say much about this area and the vertical proportions. So I wanted to check that. When I looked at the pattern piece, it looked super long. And I know it has to be longer because it's a bishop sleeve and it has to blouse, but it was still way too long. So I empirically just made it 1.5 inches shorter, and I could get that information from my test garment if I'd made the right choice or not. I wanted to check the length. I wanted to check that I was happy with the ease around the hips. So much information that test garment was going to give me. and I don't think it's a waste of time doing that. It didn't take much time at all. So let's see how that turned out. Here is my sage top test garment. I used a pair of pillowcases. This is a cotton. I think it worked really well. I have sewn in one sleeve. Now, the first thing is I always knew that this neckline was way too low. You can see, yeah, it's just not gonna work. Even though I've got a bra that's not as low cut as others, I would be at risk of showing that little bit, and I never, ever, ever wanna do that. So just by eyeballing this, considering the stay stitching at 3/8, because that's where the neckline is actually going to be once it's finished, 2 inches, 2¼ to be on the safe side, 2¼ inches higher. So that means the only piece I'm going to modify is the center front piece. I'm going to show you that on the paper. It's going to be super easy, and you don't need to modify a facing because this piece here is going to be cut twice. So it's just one piece that you need to modify, and then you just need to make this little placket 2 inches longer, and that's going to fix the whole thing. It won't be that hard. Now I have a size 14 everywhere, shoulders, bust, waist, and then over here I blended to 16. I have quite a sharp curve here from my waist. You know, it goes out to my full hip quite soon. So even though this doesn't reach my full hip, I felt that keeping the same size was just going to be too fitted there for me. You know, you're wearing undies, you're wearing something short, there's a waistband in there that takes away from the positive ease of the garment. So I felt that was safer for me, and I'm really happy with the fit. That's how it looks like on the back there. I'm happy with the length. Now this is going to be 5/8 of an inch shorter because that is the hem allowance. And it's right at the high hip. I think it's a really good length. I think the shaping here is good. Now I wanted to check where the waist placement was. There's a notch there, and there's a notch there. There's all these notches everywhere that match up where the waist should be. So I just drew that with a red pen. Remember, this is non-wearable, so I can scribble all I want. And I'm gonna take this tiny 1/4 inch elastic and put it through. Okay, the elastic is gonna find your waist. You don't really need to do much. It's just gonna go to the smallest part. So that's where my waist is, and you can see it's right on top of the line. There's not much difference. There's maybe a 1/4 inch difference. Not enough to make changes to the pattern. And at the back, I'm right on the line. This is drafted for 5'8". This would be correct for my length, but then you have shorten and lengthen lines on the pattern over here. You also have a shorten and lengthen line on the armhole. So what I found interesting was that there's shorten and lengthen lines at this point, but there isn't one on the sleeve, because if you make the armhole shorter, you would have to make this part of the sleeve shorter. So I'll show you that on the paper just in case you need to do that adjustment, but I think this is okay. Now, this is the length of the sleeve, and I have already shortened it by 1½ inches. I measured it, and the sleeve was like down to here. It is supposed to blouse over because it's a bishop sleeve, so I think that's okay. Now, look how it would look. But I've already got the elastic in. I think the shoulder fit is okay. I don't need to make any changes there. Lots of ease on the sleeve. It was not that easy to set in without puckers, and there's that shape that I'm gonna have to fix. Look at that shape there. It sort of pokes out. I'm gonna have to adjust that when I'm sewing. I don't think this is wide on my shoulders. It's right where it has to be. I'm fine, it's not falling off. And remember, when you have a sleeve, you're gonna need more ease here to be able to move. If I wanted to make this sleeveless, look how it would look. It would gape. So this is not a garment that's designed to be, you know, just hacked sleeveless. Sometimes I do that with some styles. With this one, I would have to make huge adjustments if I wanted it sleeveless. I would have to create a dot and rotate it out and everything, and just change the whole armhole. If you make a test garment, you don't sew on your sleeve, you might think, oh my gosh, this is terrible. But once the sleeve is in, it makes sense. You know, you need that space here underneath to be able to move. Otherwise, you would be stuck in your place. An armhole that's going to have a sleeve is going to be a little bit different than one that's not going to have a sleeve. I'm happy with the fit. This block that I'm using has a C cup. I am a C cup, so I really don't see anything wrong with the bust fit over here. The shape is okay. So I'm quite happy to cut into my normal fabric. You see how I was happy with the waist placement there. The little line I drew all around was actually at my waist. I was happy with the sleeves. The amount I shortened the sleeve was perfectly fine. Happy with the hippies going out to a 16 there. The sleeve, the shoulder fit was all okay. I knew that the adjustment I needed to make was on the neckline, which is easy to do. So let's see on the paper how I'm going to do this. And I'm also going to talk a little bit about the shorten and lengthen lines there. You find a shorten and lengthen line around the armhole, all around this upper chest area. And then there's one above the waist, so you can lengthen or shorten in case that waist height doesn't match you. This is the center front piece. You can tell how deep this V is just by looking at it, eyeballing it. So I determined I want to raise it by 2¼ to be on the safe side. The easiest way to not eyeball it that much is just to cut a rectangle here and then move it all up, because I want to keep that shape there that's been trued for the construction of this one. So that's how I'm going to do it. Between that grain line arrow and the edge, I'm just going to go in the middle and draw a line that's parallel, and then another one over here. So now this gap right here, I'm going to fill in with paper with exactly the 2¼ This method is just to keep the shape of the V neckline. I left that line and I cut a little bit of excess, so there's a bit of overlap on the paper. And now I'm going to tape that right there. Now I've essentially just scooted that up by the amount that I wanted. But check out this mess over here. I'm going to get my paper again and place it behind here. I want to keep the same width here on the shoulder. So that's not going to change. So from here, I'm going to go down about 5/8 of an inch just to keep the original placement. And then I'm going to find something that I like. You can see that with this method like that, the piece kept its original shape. So it's still true. It still has that little shape there. It just came in a little bit and it came up. And then we just made that line nice and smooth. And this is going to be the new front piece. You don't need to modify any other piece to raise the neckline. It's as easy as that. Just this, because we don't have a facing piece. This we cut out twice. What I did modify already is the placket length. So this is the placket length because we made it longer. Obviously, this has to fit. So I just added at the bottom. And now this is going to make total sense when we sew it. It's always important to replicate whatever length adjustment we make to any piece that goes with it. Now I wanted to point out the shorten and lengthen line here. This is the notch that matches the waist, this triangle here. And we have a shorten and lengthen line above that. So that's helpful if your bodice is longer or shorter. Now for this specific one, because it's designed to be cropped and fitted, I wouldn't be adding a lot of length just for personal preference at the hip area, because then it would just creep down to the full hip and then it would end up super fitted. Unless you wanted to blend out to another size or just add a little bit extra seam allowance below the waist, that's something personal. But this is the notch of the waist that I drew on my test garment all the way along the total garment, so that I knew that that was it. But know that there's a lengthen and shorten line above it where you can make an adjustment. There's also one up here, up higher, and that would modify the neckline as well if you were to use it. That's in case you were very petite and the armhole was too low for you. So this is where you would adjust, and then you would have to true this out as well. All of the pieces have that line above, and then one above the waist right there. See, on this armhole, it's the same. Now, armhole adjustments, I wouldn't go and adjust and take an inch off. I think that's too much. I think changes in the armhole should be really conservative. So in the case that you did shorten your armhole, you would have to come and adjust your sleeve piece. I don't see a shorten and lengthen line over here at all. But when you're assembling this PDF pattern, this is a page there that's stuck together. I would use that line as a shorten and lengthen line. And then I would cut and overlap, you know, if I was changing 3/8 of an inch or 5/8 of an inch or something like that, so that when you sew this to the armhole, it's going to make sense and you're not going to have a longer sleeve cap than your armhole. So this is where I would just cut and overlap like that if you wanted to shorten here in case the armhole was too low for you. Now, because this is a semi-fitted design, it's meant to be at the high hip, you can't just add length to it at the bottom, because the more length you add, it's just going to stay narrow like that and it's going to end up at a wider part of the body. So I would say don't lengthen it, just sew it. It's nice, it's a nice design. If you want to lengthen this, then you would have to keep adding width to the hip curve there and giving yourself more ease on the sides for that to fit. So if you're experiencing doing more advanced adjustments like that, then go ahead. But it's not like just cutting your pattern above the hem and just adding the length. I mentioned I was going to use stay tape to stabilize the neckline, which is an extra step. It's going the extra mile. It's just going to make the garment last longer, and you're going to avoid all that gaping. You know, a V shape is literally cut on the bias there. It can stretch out and gape. So anything we can do to prevent that is good. Let's see. This is a linen rayon blend. It can stretch out, and while we can stay stitched, I think putting fusible stay tape is going to be firmer and longer lasting. So I'm only going to put the fusible stay tape on the main layer. I have both layers here because for the back, center back, we cut two, so you can see both layers. I still have my pattern piece there as a reference so that this does not distort. And I'm going to fuse this layer here that's free. That's going to end up being my main layer. For the inner layer, I'm just going to stay stitch that one. The seam allowance is going to be 3/8 here, so I'm going to fuse this a tiny little bit away from the edge just to make sure that there is stay tape there where the seam is going to go later. This fusible stay tape is cut on the bias, so it really conforms well to these curves, and it's got that little cord there that's going to make it really, really stable. I love having this, and I'm so glad I was able to find this notion. Also, having this fusible stay tape here is going to help me know immediately which one is the main layer and which one is going to be on the inside. The inside is going to be stay stitched, which is that layer under there. So that is one way I'm going to be able to tell them apart. And I'm going to do the same with the main front pieces. I have two layers here, and these two layers are going to be the main front pieces. I'm going to have to use the same pattern piece to cut another two layers that are going to be on the inside. So this is where I'm going to fuse the stay tape right here.
Again, I have the paper right there.
Just to know that it's exactly the same shape and it hasn't distorted. And it's one of the first steps I'm doing before I do anything else. Now I can take this away and do this other side. Now the bottom layer is going to be my reference, so they both turn out the same. So now these are extremely firm, and I don't need to worry about this V-line stretching out over time. Let me show you the pattern pieces so you can get a general idea. Here are the main pattern pieces for the sage top from Seamwork. Now it seems like a lot of pieces, and it's just because some are cut twice. 5 because we have the button placket over here. This is the side back, this is the center back. The center back is cut on the fold, and I already have two layers right here on top of each other just to save space on the table. Then we have the center fronts. We have two layers, the main layer, the inner layer, the same as the back. So the center back and the center front will have two layers, and that's the side front in a single layer. Button placket is going to be sewn on later. It's a rectangle. Now I'm going to show you how huge the sleeve is. Here is the sleeve. It's actually quite large, very wide, very long, much longer than a regular sleeve because we expect blousing. There's going to be a casing at the bottom here. So make sure you have enough yardage. It'll take one full cut of your fabric to get the sleeve piece because it's super wide. For the seam allowances of the pattern, for general seams like shoulders, the princess seams, the side seams and all of that, you use 5/8 of an inch. But then you have to be careful because there's certain areas of the construction where it changes to 3/8. And I'm so glad it does because it's so much easier to manage sewing the neckline with 3/8 and the button placket with 3/8. So make sure you remember that. It's also very well described in the instructions. When it comes to those steps, use 3/8. But sometimes you can be distracted and just assume that the whole pattern uses the same amount, and then you can end up with mistakes. I have the full step-by-step sew along on my Patreon page on the orchid tee. Quite nice detail. If you want to join, you're welcome. You can stay as long as you want and you can leave whenever you want to. I invite you to join. It's one way that you can support the work that I do here on YouTube and just get a little extra from me than what you get on the channel. So here is my gorgeous sage top. It's gorgeous. At least in my eyes, it's like a statement blouse. I think it's amazing. This is the V neckline right here, higher than the original, very stable here with the stay tape on the inside. The button placket there is very nice, easy to sew. Now you can see the different types of designs here. It looks a little bit out there, but you can see that the dotted area, and this is right there in the center, and then the side back has this type of print, same as the side on the front. So the sides look really cool like that, and the center looks like that. And that's how I can still show off the design. Look at these little dots on the edge of the princess seam there on both sides. So nice. And then we have these gorgeous, amazing sleeves, little casing on the bottom. One thing I have to comment about the hem allowances, for both the sleeves and the bottom, it's 5/8 of an inch in total, but it's divided in two because we have one fold at 1/4 of an inch and then another fold at 3/8. For the casing, that would have made a very small channel to thread in your 1/4 inch elastic. It would have been really tight. And because my fabric is weighty, I thought that's bulky, so I didn't do that. I just folded it up once by 5/8, and my elastic is very comfortable in there, nice amount of space. And I did the same for the hem over here, especially because this area in the front has a double layer. With this type of fold once, I have 4 layers of fabric here. If I would have done it twice, I would have 8 layers of fabric, which is way too much. And the same thing happens here on the back. Things that I would do differently, they're not things that you're gonna notice, but it's just my experience here and how I feel that it's gonna look the best on this type of fabric. So go ahead and fold it up in a single layer if you want. Unless your fabric is super lightweight, then it would be okay. But then again, I don't think a really lightweight fabric would be the best for this design anyway. So here we have how it looks on the inside. It's so pretty. Look at this, double layer right there on the center back, double layer right here in the center front. If I did not have enough fabric, I would have used something else, something that matches, something that is in the same weight of the fabric. Maybe a cotton would have been nice, or another linen in a solid. But fortunately, I had enough fabric, so that's nice. And it's all so neat and serged, pink thread. All the seams are pressed open, as you can see there, everywhere. It's just the way I like to sew. Same as the shoulder seams there. Now, one thing I did different with this one, I stay stitched the armholes right at the beginning of the project. One thing that the test garment showed me was that even just sewing that test garment, the armholes stretched so much over here that it was difficult to set on the sleeve for my test garment. And I don't usually stay stitch armholes when I'm going to sew on a sleeve. I do that 100% if I'm doing something sleeveless. But the shape of the armhole is quite pronounced here. The curve is very, very sharp. So I thought, why not? So that's something extra that I did. And I'm glad because the result here was gorgeous. It feels really nice on. It feels like weighty. It just feels so amazing. It's like I'm wearing a super expensive top. That's the way it feels. And everything's really neat. You know, everything's serged in pink. It's so amazing, so lovely. I have styled these 4 ways for you to see how it looks with different styles of bottoms and my commentary as well. So let's see. This is my sage top from Seamwork. I used a beautiful linen rayon blend with pink tones. It's super lovely. I've got a matching pink pencil skirt also in linen. You'll see the details up closer, but from far away you can see it lands at the high hip. It's very well shaped. It's not got a lot of ease, and there are beautiful bishop sleeves there. Love the fit, and you don't really need to tuck this one in. As I come closer, you can see where it hits at the high hip. This is the original length of the blouse. It is drafted for 5'8", and that is my height. And there are princess seams on the back and on the front. My print is very particular, so I cut my princess seams in different areas of the pattern so you could see the difference in the seams there. So stripies on the side, little dots in the center. I think it looks really striking. The V neckline was lower originally, about 2.5 inches lower. I raised that, so now I'm happy. Otherwise it would have just been too low for me. You can see how well the fit is everywhere in the front and the back. It's not a loose fit at all. The center fronts are double, so that's how the neckline is finished, and you can see the princess seams come from the shoulders right there. The shoulder fit, perfect, super comfortable. I've sewn a size 14 for the bust up to the waist and then blended out to a 16 just to have a little bit more space there. Although all my measurements fall exactly into size 14 here, I felt that there wasn't enough ease there at the high hip for my body shape. So that's why I blended out for 16, and I was very correct in doing so because now I'm very comfortable. Because this is a shorter top and semi-fitted, I don't feel that this needs to be tucked in, and it can worn beautifully over wide leg pants like these, navy pants in rayon linen blend. Love the combination of the pink, the beige, the print is striking, and then just toning this down with the navy blue on the bottom. So this is another way I can wear it. Replace this for a wider type of skirt as well. I think it would look really good, and I'm glad I can have a top where I don't feel the pressure to tuck it in. You don't need to tuck this in. It's really nicely shaped at the waist, and it's short enough to not look bulky over wider leg bottoms like these, or a wider skirt as well. Super versatile because I can also wear it with a skirt like this that is nicely fitted at the waist and the hips, but then has more flare at the bottom. Love how this looks, and it's another way I can wear this casually between dressing up and casual, because this is a casual outfit for me, and I love the navy on the bottom. I just absolutely love the color combination here. This is a knit skirt that's pull up, super comfortable, and it has that flounce only on the back area, so it gives you all that swoosh but without the bulk around the waist and the hips. And then this is my way of wearing it casual but dressing it up a little. Lovely jeans with a flare feature at the bottom. I've got beige sneakers right there, comfy to walk around all day in. My blouse I think dresses up the jeans beautifully, but I still look really casual and I'm still super comfortable. And I have a larger pink leather bag here that I would wear for going out somewhere where I need to carry a lot of things with me. So I love that this blouse can work for dressing it up or dressing it down. I think the fabric plays a great part in this, and I take my time to choose the fabric because I want to be able to wear my garments in many ways like you saw here. I'm very happy with how this turned out. I'm glad I dove into the Seamwork website to have a look around. I have sort of ticked many that I would like to sew, and I think I'm going to sew this brand more often. The fitting adjustments weren't major, and the only adjustment I made was for personal preference and aesthetics and modesty, I suppose, because I wanted a higher neckline. Seamless experience, really enjoyable, nice instructions. That's all from me. I'll be seeing you super soon with another woven top that's amazing, so don't miss out on the content here. Always super helpful, super practical. Some episodes I have more focused on fitting, others on sewing techniques. You always get something that you can take away for your own sewing. Hope you enjoy, and I'll see you soon. Bye.